Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tech Tuesdays with Skyrocket English, a weekly series where we explore all things tech and tech industry related while we practice our listening and reading skills with a relevant topic. So for today, we're diving into a topic that has been making waves in the tech industry: layoffs. We've seen some big players like Duolingo, Amazon, Google, and more making significant cuts in the first weeks of 2024. But what does this really mean for the industry? And is this a repeat of the massive layoffs we witnessed in 2022 and 2023? Well, we're about to unravel the story, so make sure to stick around. But before we jump into the breakdown of today's articles, if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated on all things tech and improve your English comprehension while you're at it. Now, let's get started. Okay, today we have two articles to discuss, one being from Wired.com again, which, by the way, if you have not subscribed to them, I highly recommend that you do. It's only about $5 to $10 at any given time of the year to subscribe for an entire year, which is about roughly 50 reais. For an entire year's worth of access to all their articles on technology, science, and business, etc. Really good resource, especially if you want to keep up on relevant topics in English. And then the other article is from NPR, which is great because of the National Public Radio. It comes along with an audio link to listen to the actual broadcast itself, which the article is based off of. So you've got a twofer. You've got the article to read, and then you can listen to it with the link as well. So really good practice there. But like I said, this is really going to talk about the layoffs, the tech industry layoffs. And this article, which came out earlier this past week, basically is discussing, well, you'll see the two articles are kind of have a different point of view on the layoffs. And the big question right now that a lot of people have is, oh great, is this going to continue? Is this going to be a continuous trend? Is it even worth trying to get a tech job in the United States anymore? We'll find out. But before we delve into that, let's take a look at a couple of the vocabulary words that we just want to brush up on, make sure we understand before we jump into the article. So the first one here is going to be the actual term layoffs. So what are layoffs? If you've heard people talking about layoffs, it's a reduction in the number of employees, typically due to financial constraints or restructuring. It's basically getting fired. But the difference in English between a firing and a layoff is that a firing usually happens when you've done something bad at work and you need to be removed. You need to leave. So you've been terminated, you've been fired. In the UK, they say you've been sacked. That's usually something that you did. Whereas a layoff, usually the company just does not have a need for you anymore. They've hired too many people, or they just don't have the budget right now, and sorry, you gotta go. Okay, so that's what a layoff is. Then the next term is Silicon Valley, which is a region in California known for being a major technology and innovation hub. There's a big area in California where a lot of the tech jobs like Google and things like that are located, and that's this region that we're talking about. Then we have the pandemic surge. So there's this new term that just was coined recently, and it means, or it's referring to an increase in activity or demand related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So when COVID-19 hit, there were certain things that just demand skyrocketed and a lot of companies were rushing to try to fill a need for certain things. And then we have profit margin, which is a financial term, a business term, which means the percentage of revenue, the percentage of income that a company makes that represents the actual profits of how much that company is making. Okay. Now let's get into the actual articles themselves. But before we do that, actually, I want to talk about a little bit of an overview of these tech layoffs. So, yeah, the past couple of years have not been great for the tech industry. 2022, 2023 have seen thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being laid off from their tech jobs. And this year we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick as well. In fact, I recently watched a Instagram reel the other day of a young Asian American woman who worked for Discord that was part of I believe it was a 17% cut of their staff just released. So she just bought a new house, and her and her husband were trying to figure out what they were going to do. So not fun. It's something that's really impacting a lot of people these days. So let's start by going over the NPR article first, because it's a little bit of the more on the more of the negative side, and then we'll finish with the Wired.com, which has some hopeful news. So when we break for discussion towards the end, hopefully you'll have a better perspective on what's going to happen in the future. So layoffs, the numbers so far. In a recent report from NPR, over 21,000 employees have lost their jobs from over 75 different tech companies, according to Layoffs.fyi, which, by the way, is a great resource. It's literally just a website that keeps track of how many of these tech jobs are being lost. So if you want to see if there's any kind of trends going on, that's definitely the website to check out. But as of the recording of this video, that number sits just under 25,000, but it'll probably be over that by the time you watch this video. So if you're sitting watching this, most likely it'll be more than 25,000 people let go this year so far. However, the NPR article, the people who are being interviewed in the article are quick to point out that this year isn't expected to be anywhere near the total of 2023, which had some 260,000 techies losing their jobs. So that was a big punch in the gut, a big painful moment for tech workers, was that big loss of jobs in 2023. So let's take a look at what the article actually says. Microsoft said today it's laying off 1,900 employees, and it joins dozens of other tech companies, including Google, Amazon, TikTok, and Meta, in slashing tech jobs. It's the latest sign that Silicon Valley is still trying to adjust from the boom times of the pandemic. So far in 2024, over 75 tech companies have laid off over 21,000 employees. The tech industry has been shedding jobs for years now. Last year marked one of the worst in recent memory, with some 260,000 techies losing their jobs. This year isn't expected to be anywhere near that total, but the layoffs have not stopped. So these tech layoffs are just brutal, just affecting a lot of people. And the big fear right now is, will they continue? Will this be a continuous trend from here on out, now that the working landscape for tech companies is just going to be this volatile wasteland where you have no idea if you're going to have a job, one day to the next? Let's find out. So the article explores the challenges faced by the tech industry in adjusting from the boom times of the pandemic, but they say that it's mainly companies correcting for overhiring during the pandemic that is the significant driver of these job cuts. So in this article versus the Wired article, which we'll see coming up, there's this big emphasis that no, it's not AI. It's not the resurgence of AI that's canceling all these people's jobs and making them obsolete, making them not useful anymore. It is actually still an after effect of the pandemic. So a lot of these companies hired too many people, and now they have to cut back. So let's see what the article actually says here. The way that our executives are defending the continuation of job cuts may sound familiar, and no, it's not AI. The biggest driver of recent tech layoffs we've been seeing is still companies trying to correct for their overhiring during the pandemic surge, given that the high interest rate environment and tech downturn have both lasted longer than initially expected. So right now the economy is still in a little bit of a recovery phase in the United States. There are high interest rates still in the country, so a lot of these companies are still reluctant to bring on new employees and are still cutting significant jobs. So Lee, the person interviewed, estimates that about 20% of the job losses in tech have been explained away by artificial intelligence, with tech companies trimming and reshuffling staff and investing more in automation. The big focus is on generative AI, which is the next gold rush in Silicon Valley. And while the economy is improving, sticky inflation and still historically high interest rates are dampening that outlook. So again, only about 20% of the jobs, they say, are attributed to AI reasons of why people are being let go, why they're being laid off. But it really has to do with this high inflation and high interest rates that are affecting America right now, affecting the economy. They also say that small tech companies are harder hit and may be forced to lay off more people just to survive, but that bigger companies are most likely laying off employees to increase their profit margins and make investors happy. So let's see what the article says. Lee says for some small tech startups that are running out of money, yeah, they might be forced to, and this obviously makes sense. You have a small tech company, you've hired too many people, the economy isn't doing as great as you'd hoped it'd be, you're running out of money, you have to let people go. There's no option. Either you let people go or your company goes down, it goes under. But you're seeing that these tech companies are almost being rewarded by Wall Street for their cost discipline. And this is, by the way, talking about bigger tech companies like Microsoft and Google. And that might be encouraging those companies and other companies in tech to cut costs and lay off staff. If sacking tech workers lowers expenses and improves profit margins even slightly, investors looking to make money from the tech world are sure to be happy. So yes, they're saying here that it's all about making the investors, making Wall Street happy. So again, the NPR article, to wrap up, is saying that while they don't see these layoffs as being as bad as they were in the past 2 years, there's still something that is mostly a trend because a lot of these companies are trying to reduce staff and increase profits. So not really as much to do with AI and more to do with these companies stuffing their pockets full of extra money from the profits. But on a more positive note, let's see what the Wired article has to say. So the Wired article shared some similar information showing that some companies such as Duolingo have AI to blame for their layoffs. But while that isn't the case for Google or Discord, the latter, which echoes the NPR article statement that there are plenty of overhires that were done during the pandemic. So even our beloved Duolingo, the language learning app, has been affected by these tech layoffs. Duolingo cut 10% of its contractors earlier this week, citing artificial intelligence as part of its reasons. Google followed, also laying off hundreds of employees working on its Google Voice Assistant, with additional reorganization affecting its hardware teams working on augmented reality, the Pixel phone, Fitbit watches, and the Nest thermostat. Discord, which I was talking about earlier in the video, said it would lay off 17% of its staff after hiring too quickly in recent years. Well, what's the good news here? The good news is that the tech industry appears to be in better shape than previous years, and many of these layoffs seem to be targeting specific departments. So they're not just these broad layoffs across the entire company. There's specific departments within the company that seem to be hit harder than others. And because they're adjusting for demand and the change of consumer habits. And they also point out that generative AI related jobs grew last year when other tech jobs were lost. So again, this article is talking about this new trend in generative AI and how companies are really kind of shifting more towards hiring people for that versus other jobs that they would have hired for in the past. So the article says here the tech sector is looking healthy overall since consumer habits have stabilized after rapid changes during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of these latest cuts target specific departments and products and may just be a part of doing business. So this may just be the norm from now on. Whenever, for example, when they talked about Google cutting all these jobs for working for the Pixel, the Nest thermostat, and the Fitbit, if people aren't buying those products as much, they don't need as many people to work in those departments, so goodbye, they're gone. Companies may continue to make these smaller targeted cuts in coming months, but the person that they interviewed says she doesn't expect to see a layoff contagion across tech companies or other industries. So while the NPR article said that this may become a trend and all these other companies might just start, as we say, jumping on the bandwagon, following each other and laying off more people, this article is basically saying that they don't see this as being the case and that it's more in response to consumer patterns and what different consumers are doing, where they're spending their money. So this isn't sweeping right sizing as tech firms did in 2022 or 2023. As companies look for ways to utilize and monetize automation and generative AI, there's rebalancing that's taking place with jobs and priorities. So again, they're kind of shifting people. They're shifting the need of what they need for their company. So a certain department may be getting let go, but then they may be adding people into a different department, more towards these generative AI positions. Last year, generative AI-related job posts increased quickly, even as the tech industry grappled with many job losses. So finally, let's wrap up here. They talk about the unemployment rate and how things are still looking up for tech employees. Unemployment amongst tech workers in the U.S. is sitting at a low 2.3%. So only 2.3% of tech workers in the United States are unemployed currently, meaning that a lot of the laid off workers were able to find a new job. Even if it wasn't with the large tech firms, many tech workers have gone to other sectors with their skills or even taken this opportunity to found their own startup company. So let's say you're a cybersecurity technician and you work for Google or Microsoft. They let you go, and now instead of going to work for another big tech company, maybe you go and do cybersecurity for the government, or you do cybersecurity for a hospital chain, so to make sure that there aren't any more attacks on their infrastructure, for example. So according to the article here, across the board, the job market is steady, and tech job unemployment is lower at just 2.3%. Although big tech firms have made large cuts going against years of growth and stability, tech workers could find jobs in other sectors like government, manufacturing, and agriculture. Some laid-off workers have chosen these paths, and others have approached layoffs as opportunities to found their own startups. So, as I was mentioning earlier, there was that woman I was following on Instagram that was posting about her losing her Discord job. And on a positive note, a couple days afterwards, she mentioned that she had dozens of job offers lined up already. So even though she was let go from one position, there are still tons of other companies out there looking to hire. So it just seems to be this reshuffling of resources and not necessarily this big exodus of a bunch of people from the tech industry. So let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment, and what do you think? Do you think this is going to be something that's just going to continue to get worse and worse as the years go on, or do you think this is something that's just a normal little adjustment, and then this is going to be just how it is as the new biggest trend comes in? Now it's generative AI. That companies are just going to kind of focus their hiring into certain sectors and then cut out different departments that they no longer feel that they need. Let me know what you think. And there you have it, folks. A closer look at the recent wave of tech layoffs. It's a complex landscape, but from what we've gathered, it might not be the doomsday scenario that we saw in the past. Remember, if you found this video insightful, give a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to hit that button below. I've left links to both articles in the description below, so feel free to explore further. And if you have thoughts on this topic or want to share your perspective, please drop a comment. I love hearing from you guys. And before we wrap up, let's keep the positivity rolling. The Wired.com article suggests that these layoffs might be more about companies adapting to change rather than a downward spiral. So let's stay optimistic about the resilience of the tech industry. Thank you for joining me today, and don't forget to join us next week for another deep dive into all things tech. From the latest innovations to industry trends, we've got you covered. Till then, stay curious and keep exploring the fascinating world of technology. See you next week.